Hi everyone, Ben Newton from Macro Connect here. In this final video in our tutorial series, we cover lesson number 6 in the Code to Compose student-facing workbook. So lesson 6 covers effects and randomization. So we're going to cover both of those very quickly today. This is one of the more challenging lessons for students to wrap their heads around. So paying attention to this and preparing by watching this video before introducing the lesson to your class will be really beneficial and make it easier for you to sort of iron out any wrinkles in the lesson before they even come up. So jumping right into it, effects. For those of you who haven't heard of effects before, they are essentially just slight minor changes that are made to the audio signal or the sound waves of the music that we create and listen to. So that can mean anything, but some of the most common effects that you may have heard of are reverb, short for reverberation, echo, self-explanatory. There's tons of these things. There's distortion. You may have heard of like distorted guitars, but these are all effects that change the way that the sound waves of our composition, sound to our ears. So how do we add them to our compositions in SonicPy? So right here, here's just a couple random notes that I've written out here. They're just going to sound like that traditional SonicPy beep. It'll sound like this. Very straightforward beeps, kind of boring. What can we do to spruce this up? So adding effects works in the same way that we use live loop commands in that we have a do and an end. So the command for using effects or calling them up is typing with fx. And here's your list, kind of just like how we would find samples. We can pick one, any of them that we want. Just pick echo, because it's a familiar one that we all sort of understand. And again, we write the word do. So now, this isn't a live loop, but we pick what we want to have an echo. So we can go as far down as we want. Let's just say right here, after this sleep, we want this to end. And we'll have this wait for 1 second before it plays out the rest of this. This is what it'll sound like. So there you go. Now, these first 3 notes that are played sound sort of drawn out, echoey, like you're in a cavern or a cave, and you can hear them just a little bit differently. Almost immediately sounds better and can start generating some extra inspiration for you or your students as you're composing. So again, take a listen. So notice how everything inside of this with fx command, do and end, receives the echo, and the remaining play notes at the bottom here do not. So we could just as easily come down here and just end it and have everything have an echo. Just as well. Now everything has an echo. Now remember in the last lesson we talked about nesting. If you wanted to just repeat this forever, you can still nest multiple commands that have a do and an end. So notice how down here we have this extra indentation. It's not quite going to work yet unless we write one more end. Now we have this nested loop, and this is just going to play over and over and over again. So a lot of this lesson is just instructing your students to experiment with as many of the different effects in the library that until they find the ones that are surprising to them or they didn't know existed. Some of them will make more sense, like distortion. Compression in music is a little more difficult to wrap your head around, but still very common. And then there's just some off-the-wall ones in here that can really be fun for your students, but have them come in through here. There's got to be about 25 or 30 of these, and just experiment with all of the different effects that SonicPy has to offer. So on to our last commands that we're going to learn here, and they're all around randomization. So there are many ways to generate random sequences of values and notes in SonicPy. However, our focus is going to be on generating sounds within a range by using a command called rrand and rrand_i. And then we can manipulate how those random notes sound in a more controlled way by learning how to use something called use underscore random underscore seed. Those are the commands we're going to learn here. So let's dive in and listen to an example to help make sense of this. So in lesson 6, students are going to be asked to type in something like this and give it a listen. It'll sound like this. So as you can hear, we're hearing a lot of what seem to be random notes playing in the background. Some of them are high-pitched and annoying, others are not. And I can fix that here. So I'll explain this here right now. Everything here is familiar up to this point. Live loops, we know that. Play commands, we know those. Sleep commands, we know those. Only thing new is this rand and this parenthesis situation going on here. So what rand does, we're pulling a value in between the left and the right number in our parentheses. So 30 represents the play 30, 80 represents play 80. So when we hit run in this live loop, every time the loop starts, it's picking a different random number in between here. Now, the other command that we learn about randomization in code to compose is randi. It is the exact same command as rand. However, rand pulls long strings of decimals, not whole numbers, whereas randi pulls whole numbers that are just rounded to the 10th, essentially. So instead of randi, I can show you an example. It won't mean that much here. I can show you in the log that we're getting notes 67.4451, 34.6707, like these very like longer string, definitely more random notes in between 30 and 80. Now let's just take a look at the difference when we do underscore I. We can hit run. Notice as we watch these tick by, these are all just whole numbers that we're hearing here. So it can be very useful if you want to keep things a little more manageable. If you're writing a melody and you want something to play in the background of that melody that potentially may match up with what you're writing, this is how you do it. So from here on out, let's just focus on randi, just for purposes of this. So any command in SonicPy that we've learned that has a number value associated with it, whether it's play or sleep or amp or pan, it doesn't matter. Anything that has a number associated with it, you can choose or pull a random number from a range using rand or randi. So to illustrate this, let's just keep this at play 50 or something. But let's say we want to have sleep. Our sleeps need to be random in between 1 and 2. So we do our command randi, immediately do a parentheses, comma, and 2. So now what we have when we hit run, notice how randomly we're either getting a sleep of 1 or 2. Sometimes we get a bunch of 1s in a row, sometimes we get a bunch of 2s in a row. But the whole point is that it's random. So that's just to illustrate anything with a number, you can pick between a range. Some students might not see the benefit of this, others may. Some like how maybe noodly, if you will, how noodly it makes their piece sound, makes it sound a little more like free jazzy. There's a lot of different uses for using randomization, but that's up to each individual user to determine. So put that power in your student's hand, and you'll be surprised what they come up with. So the next thing to cover is just how random is a random command in SonicPy. So if this was truly random, every time I hit the run button here, this would play the same amount of durations for sleep here. To better illustrate it, I'll go back to making an rn command for play notes, and we'll make it 40 and 60. Okay, easy peasy. So now you get an idea for what that sounds like. But if we play it again, if you listen closely, those random quote unquote values are the same. So if we look at the log, again, if we start it, 59, 42, 55. Let's listen to if we do it again, 59, 42, 55, like clockwork. So what gives? It's not actually random? Well, no. SonicPy uses something called seeds. Now, there is a default seed that we haven't set right now. So this randomization And every other randomization command that follows it is going to always sound the same when you start your program from the beginning. And this is useful for when you're composing if you've landed and experimented with many seeds to find one random melody that sounds great or one randomization element that just is perfect. You can recreate it just by setting the seed. Now, that might be a little confusing here. Just know that it works kind of like use BPM. You put it before whatever you want to control, and then it just affects everything that comes after it. So the command is use random seed. Now, what we're going to do, let's just say it can be any number. Really, like you could just spam a bunch of numbers like this. Now if I run it, now we're seeing 54, 54, 54. This random seed, it's pretty long, maybe that's why. Let's try this again. 46, 60, 49. So again, if we play this again, 46, 60, 49, we get those a random sequence. All we've done is shuffled up the starting point as to where the randomization occurs. That way we can recreate this from device to device, machine to machine, different instances of Sonic Pi, etc. So those are the most important things. rand and rand I picks whole numbers. rand picks, look like to thousands or one beyond that, 4 decimal points to the right, essentially. Um, so, and also we covered use random seed. So those are the main randomization elements in Sonic Pi. Um, much of this lesson is just getting them familiar with having a command where there's a range of different values to be picked in between parentheses. But again, just remember and instruct your students that randomization, you can always pick ranges for any command that has numbers associated to it. And it's up to your students to get creative with that as much as they want. So that concludes all of the tutorial videos for Code to Compose. I hope that these were helpful in getting you prepared for putting this information out in front of your students. Um, the only thing left to do is to set a couple days aside to have your students complete their final projects. There's a bunch of prompts in I think it's on page 25 of the Code to Compose workbook. Students should just read those instructions, and you should give them a full day to work, and then a little bit more on a second day to finish their compositions. Then bring some speakers into class. Bring in rent a fog machine. Dim the lights and have your students perform their coded musical pieces up in front of the class. It's a really fun time. It's a nice culmination to this 8 to 10 session curriculum that you've been doing. So again, my name is Ben Newton from Macro Connect. Thank you for purchasing Code to Compose. I hope this was helpful. Happy coding, and please don't hesitate to reach out to Macro Connect. Our contact information can be found on our website, posted immediately after this video ends. So again, thanks and enjoy.